In this video, we're going over the Valorant Champions meta tier list because we know all the best characters that all the top teams are playing and the characters that are seeing zero play. So we're going to break it all down so you know exactly what characters are popping off right now and what characters are severely lacking. Now, the first character that we got to talk about for Champions is the straight loser. Out of all the games that have been played, the only agent that has a 0% pick rate, not a single team that is represented is picking this agent, and it's Deadlock. Valorant's newest agent is having some trouble gaining ground, whether it's her lack of consistent value in her kit or the fact that she's just straight up underpowered. The character is seeing no play and gets the lowest rating on our list in what would be like a triple F tier. The next up, we do gotta talk about two agents that only have seen a 1% pick rate, so yeah, it's definitely not that far away from Deadlock, but 1% is a lot better than nothing, and it's both Reyna and Sage. Now, both of these characters are only seeing about a 4% pick rate on Bind, and Reyna is seeing a little bit more on Ascent as well, but really, these characters are not picked that much. Now, Reyna makes perfect sense as a character that is much better in ranked as a pub stomper, but for Sage in particular, there's a much bigger story, as in the only map that Sage was legitimately seeing play on is Icebox, which is not currently in the map pool, and in addition to that, some of the other maps that she was seeing play on have slowly but surely fallen down the wayside, once a character that was pretty pronounced in the meta has become one of the worst characters to pick, at least at a pro level. Now, next up, we do gotta talk about Yoru, who has doubled it with a 2% pick rate, getting only a little bit of play on Bind and a little bit of play on Pearl. And this character is another character that is rather difficult to make work in a coordinated setting. While we have seen players in the past utilize him like Tens and Asuna to great effect, it's not very reliable or consistent than any of the other meta picks. And I also think that you would need someone that is very, very confident in Yoru and a team that is really, really synced up to play around him perfectly to even match the value that you can get out of some of the other more orthodox picks, so it makes sense that he's only sitting at about a 2% here. Now, next up is a 3% pick rate, and the last character that I would put in the quote-unquote meta F tier, and we have Phoenix, who is only seeing play on Pearl at about an 18%. Now, Phoenix is another character that is a lot better in ranked play than he is in coordinated play. Due to the nature of his kit, he's really good at doing a lot of different things himself, but not really that great at setting up individuals to do something better. He's not really a great team player, more of a solo carry agent, and for these reasons, in a meta tier list, he's going to be lagging behind. The more and more cohesion and teamwork that you bring to the table, the worse and worse Phoenix becomes. So while he's fantastic for ranked play, for pro play, not so much. But what's fantastic for your rank is SkillCapped.com, where you can learn how to become a top tier player in a click of a button. Whether you're trying to master your movement or gain pixel perfect aim, we got in-depth guides over everything you could possibly want, plus our private Discord coaching has been helping more people achieve their dream rank than ever before. What are you waiting for? Check it out right now in the links down below. Now, if we were moving up a little bit in tier to a quote-unquote D tier, the first character on our list has only a 4% pick rate, and that's Neon, with 13% on Bind and 20% on Fracture. A character that has definitely fallen in pick rate on Fracture in particular, but even so, she would probably be a little bit higher on this list if Fracture was just picked more at only a 5 maps played on Fracture compared to everything else, which is about 10 plus. Now, in coordinated play, there might be a couple of stronger options in the duelist role, but for ranked play, I think if you're just coordinating with a single other person, you can definitely still get a lot of value out of Neon, even if she's underrepresented in the meta pick rate. Next up, we do got to talk about Gekko at about a 4% pick rate as well, seeing a little bit of play on Bind, Haven, and Lotus, a character that is still lagging behind a lot of his competitors in the initiator slot. And honestly, I really don't think it has that much to do with the power level of Gekko. I think it has to do with two key factors. Number one, it's rather hard to get the value or the full value out of his utility because it's hard for you to waste time trying to rotate to this when every second counts. Rotating to his utility to reacquire it can be a little bit difficult when other initiators get to just get it back for free. And that leads me to the second point, which is there's a lot of competition in the initiator slot. When you're picking Gekko, you're deciding against many of the other powerful initiators, so it's no wonder why he's only picked 4% of the time. Now, quite a jump up from our 4% pick raters, we do have quite a few 9%ers, starting off with Chamber, who is seeing actually over 20% 25% on Bind, our first character seeing over 25%, and a little bit of picks here and there on some other maps. But overall, this character is actually seeing more play than a lot of people expected. Seems to be a good pick on that Bind in particular, just being able to heavily control or isolate the space that the enemy team is taking, completely lock things down on defense by actually cutting off a huge amount of space for the enemy team, and gathering information as well, using himself as a pseudo information gatherer and a duel taker. In addition to that, he's an incredibly good opper, and all around this character seems like he can be a tool in the right team. He's actually getting some things done. But let's talk about Harbor, who's seeing kind of like a smattering of pick rate across different maps. Pretty much everything besides Split and Fracture, he's seeing a little bit of play with as a double controller in a double controller setup. Honestly, Harbor is always going to be a rather niche character just due to the fact that he's never going to be a solo controller, and with a lot of other duo controller comps viable, it makes sense that he would often get the short end of the stick, even in pro play. Now, the last 9%er is definitely Cypher, another character that is seeing above a 25% pick rate on a map in Split, a map that is just always been fairly good for Cypher historically, and with it being one of the few maps that KILLJOY is really lagging behind in pick rate on, it makes sense for you to try Cypher here and there for some teams, especially when it's a lot harder for you to clear his utility when there's so many different variations of setups that you can have. At the very least, a few teams are willing to give him a shot on Split in particular. Now, if that was the D tier, next up is the C tier, and we're going through a pretty big jump up all the way to 15% with Fade, a character that is finally breaching the 50% pick rate mark on Lotus. This is a map that is kind of made for Fade, really great for a lot of her utility, especially the tight corridors, being able to clear that with your dog, and your eye being able to have a ton of lineups on this map. This seems like the perfect match made in heaven for Fade in particular, and she's seeing a little bit of pick rate on a number of different maps like Bind, Pearl, Ascent, and Fracture. 10% pick rate here and there. Really, Lotus is where she's shining though, and it seems that a lot of teams are deciding that she's just a needed initiator on said map. And a lot of times on Lotus right now, we're seeing a maxed out Raze double controller KILLJOY Fade setup, which is kind of like the optimal setup currently right now, and she slots right into it. Next up, we do gotta talk about Kayo at an 18% pick rate, seeing a little bit of play on Pearl at 32%, but Ascent in particular at a 83%. Basically just a must play on Ascent. Really strong pick, and one of the characters that is defining the Ascent meta, and really it makes a lot of sense. The fact that there's a ton of lineups on Ascent, the fact that you can deny pushes through walls on Ascent with your knife, and really great on retakes. Overall, KILLJOY just makes a lot of sense for this map, and he's definitely a slam dunk pick for Ascent in particular. Now, I know this was a rather short C tier, but let's move on to the B tier because we're doing another jump up in percentage all the way up to the 20s. 24% Brimstone, seeing an 83% pick rate on Bind and an 80% pick rate on Fracture. Basically a slam dunk pick, and honestly, just like what we talked about before, he would have a higher percentage if Fracture was just picked more. It's just simply not, but Bind is picked quite a bit, so it is a reasonable gauge, although I think he would be probably closer to 30%. Now, even though he's only played on these two maps, he's oftentimes, especially on Bind, played in a double controller setup. In fact, 100% of the time he is played in a double controller setup, and specifically on Fracture, he is seeing some double controller setups, but oftentimes he will play that solo controller on that map in particular. A really solid character that is honestly good in both ranked and pro play, and a character that is a super solid role filler and has maps that fit his smokes particularly well. Now, tied with him, we have a 24% pick rate Breach with a 29% on Split, 65% pick rate on Haven, and a whopping 90% pick rate on Fracture. Another character that is kind of being hurt in pick rate based on Fracture's play rate. And as you can kind of see from this tier list, characters are really kind of aligning very directly with maps, especially some characters are like 100% pick rate on a certain map and then 0% pick rate on everything else. So depending on how popular that map is picked, those characters will be better and worse in that hypothetical meta. But if we looked at every map even, it would be a different story. Now, this is a really solid initiator that is going to enable a lot of plays, especially on Fracture. He's just kind of perfect for Fracture, being able to take a lot of space and control around the map. And for Haven in particular, especially on defense, you get to utilize him to take aggressive space on defense, take aggressive fights in a way that a lot of characters can't take, and he's really great on retakes as well. He's just a really great character on both those two maps, and honestly, I'm not surprised that he's seeing some play on Split as well. Another great map for him. Now, next up in the B tier, we do got to talk about Sova, and Sova's at that 25% pick rate, 23% on Pearl, 50% on Haven, 78% on Ascent, and split, 40% on fracture. He's honestly seeing that a double initiator setup with Kayo, a really solid pick, and he's really great on Ascent in particular. And on top of that, the fact that he's flexible means that he's going to be seeing some play on Haven, often alongside Breach as a double initiator setup as well. And really the only thing that is holding this character back the most is, one, bind and split aren't great optimized for him. There are other characters that are seeing a bit more play and are just better suited for the map. And two, there are other initiators that are just really strong. Oftentimes we're seeing a specialization of initiators where we're seeing certain initiators really play on certain maps, and Sova has his maps that he's good in, and then there's other maps that there's another more optimal choice. The last up in the B tier, let's talk about Astra at a 28% pick rate. Probably the character that is the best in coordinated play as compared to her ranked counterpart. 50% pick rate on Split, 50% pick rate about on Pearl, and seeing a little bit of pick rate here and there. Basically a character that is only seeing play in a double controller lineup. Oftentimes she's either being played with a Harbor, with a Viper, or even with an Omen. A character that is really strong, especially on Pearl and Split, being able to set up combos and synergies with her team and bringing a lot of viable utility to the table in addition to fulfilling her controller duties. A really solid pick, and a lot of people are opting to pick her in a double controller lineup as opposed to adding in a duelist or adding in another initiator. Now that would be the end of the B tier, and we got to jump way up, all the way up to the freaking A tier, because we're going all the way to the 40%ers with Omen at a 43% pick rate. About 50% pick rate on Split, about 50% pick rate on Haven, 75% pick rate on Lotus, and a whopping 94% pick rate on Ascent. This character is just really strong. Very reliable. One of the best controllers in the entire game, and as a dome smoker, seeing the most amount of play, even with hefty competition in the dome smoker category. Honestly, Omen is just really strong and really great at enabling duelists to take space as well with his paranoia. Really just a solid controller that is really great at both doing his duties and adding other utility that can help his team, and he's fantastic at lurking as well. Just a solid pick and definitely deserving of our A tier. Now we are doing a jump up, but the next four characters are still going to be in the A tier right now because they're all 50%ers. We're going to talk about Jett first. 42% pick rate on Split, and outside of that, 100% on Pearl, 90% on Haven, 94 Ascent. She's just a dominating force on these maps. Just needed to be played. She's really always going to be played on Pearl. And just a really solid meta choice for any team. I mean, being able to enable a Jett to go in and take space is just one of the best things that you could possibly do. In addition to that, she's the best at opping right now if we talk about the top meta picks. She's very flexible, great on eco. She's just the go-to character that you want to enable and build an entire composition around, or build a composition around enabling. And as such, she is just played a giant percentage of the time, especially on those maps that she's favored in. In addition to that, the yin to the yang is Raze at a 54% pick rate, seeing 96% on Split, 92% on Bind, 100% on Lotus, and 70% on Fracture, in a very similar way that Jett is seeing all this dominated play. All the maps that Jett doesn't see play on, Raze does. It's like there's one duelist that's more optimal for certain maps, and it's like, which one are we gonna pick? Are we gonna pick Jett or Raze for each individual map? And oftentimes you're picking one or the other. You're utilizing these players or these agents to go and take that space, be the flexible entryer, be the flexible fragger, and yeah, they're just better situated for different maps, but they're both equally just as powerful. Next off in the 54% pick rate, still in that A tier, is the initiator of choice, the one that is being decided as the best initiator in the meta right now, and it's Skye at 100% pick rate on Split, 92% pick rate on Bind, and seeing just a lot of play across the board on most maps besides Ascent. Makes sense she's not seeing a lot of play on Ascent, where both Kayo and Sova are better suited. Now this character is the one that is going to gather you information, allow your duelist to take space on point, set up plays, and is just an all-around grounding force for any team, and is the character that actually is the glue that holds these compositions together, and is the one that allows a lot of these strategies to be executed properly. Definitely one of the best characters in the game and deserving of our A tier. Now last up in the A tier, we have Viper at a 57% 87% pick rate, 67% on split, 100% on bind, 90% on lotus, and some pick rate kind of all over the place. Really, really great as the only line smoker that we have. Pretty much necessary on certain maps and really strong even in a duo control setup on maps like bind, where she's duoed with Brimstone, or maps like lotus, where she's often duoed with Omen. And really, this character is seeing this much pick rate even when her best map, Breeze, is out of rotation, and Icebox is another map that she's needing in as well. When those maps come back into the fold, yeah, she's just gonna be like a super dominant triple S tier pick. But for right now, she's really, really strong and really needed. But for this tier list, you'll notice that we did something different. We only put one character in the S tier because she stands far and away the strongest character in the meta right now, and the highest picked at a whopping 64% pick rate. That's crazy. I mean, just look at how much she's played. So 0% on bind, 25% on split. So it's like, it looks kind of bad. 95 Pearl, 90 Haven, 95 Lotus, 89 Ascent, 80 freaking Fracture. She is just killing it right now. One of the best characters to play, and it just makes sense how strong her utility is, how much information she gives to a team, the fact that she completely allows the team to change strategically on defense because she just locks down a side so well, and she creates so much difficulty for an aggressing team to go through. She's really, really good at denying or stopping a lot of these really strong executes. And really, I put her only in the S tier just because she's just picked far and away more than everything else, even though all the A tier picks are super, super good, and all the B tier picks are characters that are really good on specific maps. But overall, this is the overview snapshot of Champions meta, the tier list for high ranked and pro play. But getting to a high rank is only a click away at SkillCapped.com. But we have the in-depth agent guides over all of these agents. So if you want to learn how to position, how to play, how to dominate on every single character, definitely check it out right now in the links down below.